Imagine you are one of the wealthiest men in the world, and for your late wife, you build something special to celebrate her life and love of art in one of the largest cities globally. Imagine this city to be one of the most culturally rich cities with one of the highest number of museums in the world. Imagine you hired a very well-renowned architect to create a museum that is not only captivating on the outside, but also beautiful on the inside with its many levels of stunning art, creating a place that is like a dream for those who love art and culture. Imagine on top of all of this, you make this massive and wondrous place free for people from all walks of life. If you are imagining all of this, you are probably imagining one of the most unique museums in the world, which is Museo Soumaya, in a city that in my opinion is one of the most underrated capitals in the world for all that it has to offer. So join me as we discover this stunning feat of architecture that was a dream of a man that at one point was the richest man in the world in honor of his wife. We start this journey in Polanco, which is a very affluent part of Mexico City where this museum is located. Although there are many upscale hotels in this area, I generally prefer boutique hotels, first of all because they tend to have more character, and also they tend to be a lot easier to get in and out of. L'Héritage Royal Colonial is one of such hotels in a very centric part of Polanco, and I was lucky enough to get a pretty sizable suite as you're about to see.
Alright guys, we have arrived in a hotel here in Polanco, which is basically a suites type of a hotel, as you can see. It also looks quite historic. I'm really liking it. It has quite a bit of a charm. I would definitely say a very European feel to it. Something you will find that is very common here in Mexico City is that a lot of the hotels don't have AC. And as excruciating as that sounds, it's because, generally speaking, the weather's pretty nice a good chunk of the year. One can say most of the year. And even though we're in the middle of the summer, it is actually quite cloudy and rainy outside, so it's a lot cooler than, say, Texas. Right now it feels like probably around 80 degrees, and in the nighttime it'll probably cool down to under 70, maybe even 65, so quite honestly I don't think I'll be needing the AC anyway. This is the view from my balcony. It was kind of in the middle of things here in Polanco. Like I said, this area is kind of a mix of old and new things. Of course they are knocking some of the older things down and building newer towers, but as a whole this area is fairly old, but for the most part very high end.
It was now time to leave the hotel and walk to what we came here to see. The walk will be roughly a mile long to the museum, but being that it is Mexico City, there's usually so much to see along the way. After wrestling a very stubborn elevator that kept on closing on me a few times, I was on my way. From the hotel, I take Avenida Musset northward until I reach Avenida Horacio, and then I utilize the park within Avenida Horacio to walk eastward towards the museum. It is common to find these type of parks in Mexico City, and this is a big reason why this city is so walkable in many areas. Polanco is an affluent area located next to Colonia Cuauhtémoc, where you find the famous Angel of Independence. And Cuauhtémoc basically serves as one of the major financial centers of Mexico City, while Polanco is a lot more residential, but still quite dense. Though Polanco is not a new area, it is quite well taken care of, as you can see, because of the wealth.
Alright guys, we're about to get to Avenida Molière, which we're going to turn right and go northward towards Plaza Antara, which is one of the nicest malls of this area. Pretty much behind Museo Soumaya. Alright, here we make a right on Avenida Molière. We say goodbye to Avenida Horacio. And as I told you before, here's a very upscale area. So you see a lot of very upscale mixed-use places like this. Structure right here.
What we see here is Palacio del Hierro, which is considered to be one of the highest-end department stores in Mexico. As I was walking, I noticed a boba place across the street and I was desiring a Vietnamese coffee. I ended up purchasing a Taiwanese coffee, which I was told was similar to Vietnamese coffee, and to be honest with you, it was quite creamy and delicious. Shortly after, I arrived at one of the most beautiful shopping centers in the area, and that is Plaza Antara. As I have mentioned in other videos, Mexico has built many modern and beautiful malls recently, in part because of its newfound wealth from the industrialization of the country. From what I read, Plaza Antara opened in 2006, and even though it is not one of the biggest shopping centers in the city, it still stands as one of the nicest. The cool thing is, walking through this mall to the other side happens to be on the way to the museum. So enjoy the remaining footage of the mall as we continue our journey to the museum. It was now time to exit out of the other side of Plaza Antara and move on to Museo Soumaya, which at this point was only a few blocks away. And as we exit, we see one of many new modern projects going up in the city, like this one that seems to have slides emanating from it. I finally get my first view of this beautiful museum, accompanied by a symphony of construction noises. From what I understand, this museum was founded by Mexican multi-billionaire Carlos Slim and was named after his late wife, Soumaya Domit, who died in 1999. The original museum was built in the 90s in a different area, but this new building was opened to the public in 2011 and was designed by the architect Fernando Romero.
I was just told that this place closes at 7, which I believe is half an hour more than what they usually stay open for. And the cool thing about this museum, opens 7 days a week and it's completely free. This place is definitely a must-do if you happen to visit Mexico City.
Upon entry, one of the first things we see is a large open area with many statues, but more notably a massive replica of the David, which was supposedly created between 2018 and 2020. Another notable piece of art in this area is a representation of the Gates of Hell, which is a very famous bronze sculpture from the 19th century with various images of the underworld. And nearby there was a very detailed and ornate sculpture of Moses. From the ground floor, we have many other levels that we can access either via an elevator or stairs and ramps. And of course, along the stairway you see many pieces of art, but to not spoil this, I will only show you bits and pieces and samples of what you can find on the different levels. To be expected, there was a variety of art revolving around local culture and history. This museum also featured paintings of the many landmarks in this country, such as the famous Metropolitan Cathedral in the historic center of Mexico City, as well as pictures, paintings, and drawings of a more natural type, such as this one showing what Mexico City may have looked like when Lake Texcoco was still around, and paintings of what seemed to be the famous Aztec chinampas, as well as two of the biggest volcanoes in North America, which are Iztaccíhuatl and Popocatépetl. I was treated to displays of historical publications, some dating as far back as the 1600s. As well as displays of national coins, old and modern. And being that French culture has a sizable part in Mexican history, it is no surprise that there was a level dedicated to the famous French sculptor Augustine Rodin.
Rodin was actually a French sculptor from the 1800s, who is supposedly considered to be the father of modern day sculpture. So let's check out his work. Of course, again, I'm just going to skim through the area, but just to kind of give you an idea. And I don't know how many of you guys know this, but there kind of is a love affair. I call it a love affair between Mexico and France. And I see it both ways. A lot of people from Mexico love French culture and France itself. And I've noticed a lot of people from France tend to love coming to Mexico and the culture here. There's also a lot of history between the two countries, so you will see a lot of French influence in this country. Even a lot of the baked goods have a lot of French influence. The French influence in Mexico comes from the invasion of Mexico in the mid-1800s. And though it was very brief, it did leave an impact, a very big cultural impact. And quite honestly, a very beautiful one. It mixed quite well, in my opinion, with the existing Spanish, indigenous, and mestizo culture, giving it even more of a mix, giving more diversity of things in this country.
Let's enjoy a little bit more of Rodin's work before moving on to another level. As we move on to another floor, all the ramps around this structure make this place feel like a multi-level maze. Interestingly, the walls lining the ramps were even utilized for more displays and information. We reach another level dedicated to the romanticism of the vanguards. From what I understand, the romantic style was quite popular during the 19th century and used techniques such as bright colors and even distorted images to evoke strong emotions. This style was supposedly in part a result of the turmoil Europe was going through during the late 1700s and 1800s, such as the very bloody French Revolution. And just like the classical era, this era was also full of suggestive art. This area was massive, just like the many other levels of this museum, but there is so much more to discover, so we move on. We arrive to a level that focuses on art of a more religious type. As you may already know, Catholicism is a big part of Mexican culture and history brought to this country by the Spanish colonialists during the 1500s. So it only makes sense to have a level dedicated to this religion and Christianity as a whole. As we move on to other floors, we see more beautiful and interesting historical paintings, as well as portraits of important figures from the past. And even more sculptures, some very ornate with intricate details. There was so much more to discover, but just as I promised, I only provided a sample of all that there was to see, so that you may have an even stronger reason to visit what I feel is one of the most unique museums. And as I was leaving this phenomenal museum, I could not help but think what an underrated gem Mexico City is for all that it has to offer. In a city that is known to have one of the largest collections of museums in the world, I feel that Museo Soumaya is one of the crowning jewels. The fact that this structure was built by one of the most financially powerful men in memory of his wife really reminds me of another magnificent structure that was built a few centuries ago on the other side of the world.